to explain the plot of Skin Game to one of my friends who has never read a Dresden Files book, and I quickly discovered there is too much plot in this book to be able to explain it clearly and concisely, because in order to understand Skin Game, you have to understand Cold Days, you have to understand Ghost Story, you have to understand Changes, you have to understand what came before Changes. You pretty much have to understand the entire series, which is one of the reasons why Skin Game really works. You feel like you're getting the payoff for reading a book 15. Though some aspects of Dresden Files definitely are pretty episodic, that you could read these books kind of out of order and sometimes that'd be totally fine. But when you come to a book like Skin Game, there is so much writing on the emotional payoffs of this book, and the emotional payoffs are on the foundation of all the other books that came before it. Because in Changes, Harry's life got all knocked down. He lost everything, down to his literal life and all the items in it. Then in Ghost Story, he didn't really get a chance to rebuild any of that. He got back his life, and he got to see how his friends were doing, but he didn't really get to rebuild. In Cold Days, similarly, he didn't get to rebuild much. I mean, he got a car, he got to talk to his friends, but at the end of the day, his life is still in shambles. He's moving to Creepy Island. He isn't in an emotional place to start a romantic relationship with Murphy. He really needs some more rebuilding. So in Skin Game, after a year hiatus of adventures for Harry, he gets to go on another adventure and he gets to come to terms with how to rebuild himself. So I liked this book a lot more when I read it for the second time, because the first time I was just too focused on the plot to really have patience for all these nice emotional moments. Because the plot is very heisty. I mean, the title is Skin Game, that means rigged game. It's a con from the very beginning, and you know that Harry is up to something that he's not telling Murphy, he's not telling Butters, and he's not even telling the reader. But you know he's got some secret plan brewing. And you know that Nicodemus has a secret plan brewing, and Mab has a secret plan brewing. And when you're reading the book for the first time, it's so easy to get caught up in that, and then get impatient because it's not really giving you many clues. It told you in the beginning, hey, there's secrets. And then every now and then it'll remind you, hey, there's a secret coming. But there are so many times in this book where the plot stops and slows down for a more character-driven moment and kind of doesn't care about its own plot for a little bit. And so on the second time when I read this book, I was able to not care so much about these secrets that have been dangled in front of the reader and care more about Harry's amazing emotional journey. Because in this book, he's not only rebuilding the physical things of his life and starting to figure out, is he going to move back to Chicago? Harry is rebuilding the emotional parts of his life. And front and center here is Harry's moral compass. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Because pre-Changes, Harry did some bad things, but he felt that he was a good guy. But in Changes, even that is taken away from him, and now he's not even sure if he is still a good guy and if he will continue to be on Team Jedi. And this is why Nicodemus is also such a fitting villain for this book, because Nicodemus as a villain has always represented pure evil. That maybe deep down inside he's got some good intentions, but for the intents of the plot and the narrative, he's pretty much always pure evil. And Michael, on the other hand, and the other Knights of the Cross are the pure good. And lots of characters in this book are set up as foils to Harry in different interesting ways. The coolest one here is Hannah Ascher, who pretty much is Harry if Harry had been less lucky. Or if Harry had had less good connections in the White Council as a teenager, because just like Harry, Hannah Ascher, in self-defense, burnt some people to death. And of course, broke the laws of magic, now the wardens are after you. And Harry was able to kind of get away with it because Ebenezer stood up for him, but Hannah Ascher had no one to stand up for her, and she had to deal with the consequences of her actions and went on the run from the wardens. When Harry challenged the White Council in Turncoat, he pretty much got away with it. No lasting consequences. Maybe some people in the White Council like him a little less, but everything turned out pretty okay. For Hannah Ascher, every time she confronts the wardens, she just ends up making the wardens more mad at her. And both Dresden and Ascher picked up Lashiel's coin. For Harry, in the end, he got to be free of Lashiel's shadow in his head. He got to pretty much get away with no consequences and only benefits. But for Hannah Ascher, that's what led to her doom. For Harry, when he needs more power and signs on with Mab, yeah, he's worried that bad things will happen, but so far, it hasn't been that bad. He's gotten away pretty much with very little consequences. And for Hannah Ascher, signing on with Nicodemus, again, led to her destruction. So it's like Hannah Ascher is Harry Dresden. If Harry Dresden had to face the actual consequences of his actions, and this comes down to even Hannah Ascher has to face the consequences of Harry Dresden's actions that he didn't even have to face. That when he took out the Red Court, he also took out the Fellowship of St. Giles. And this doesn't really figure in his life at all. However, this was a big, devastating moment for Ascher. So having Hannah Ascher in this story just emphasizes how incredibly lucky Harry has been so far, and it also shows exactly where he could be now if he had made a little bit worse decisions in a few times, if he had resisted the Wardens a little bit more, or if he had given in to Lashiel. And it also shows where Harry could go, because at any time, he could go join some more Team Bad Guys, and he could become just like Ascher is, on the run from the White Council, and making deals that she doesn't completely understand that end up being very bad for her. But on the other side of the spectrum, we have Michael, who also shows Harry where he could go, but this is where he could go on the good side, because Michael, back in Turncoat, also went through a devastating loss. Lost his ability to go fight the good fight as a Knight of the Cross, and he was able to rebuild his life into something even more beautiful in a lot of ways, that he's still able to fight the good fight, but in a different kind of sense. And he's able to spend more time with his family and have a happy retirement. And even here in Skin Game, he's able to come back out as a Knight of the Cross. So Michael is, in a lot of senses, Harry's hero, and he's exactly who Harry in some ways wants to become. That Harry wants to become the kind of man that can rebuild his life into something even better after everything has been torn down. And then we also have Nicodemus as a really direct foil for Harry. That Nicodemus and Harry do have a lot of things in common, but the main difference is where they fall on the good-evil spectrum. They're pretty much flip-flopped. That Harry is good with some evil tendencies sometimes, and Nicodemus is evil, but sometimes seems to be working towards a good cause. Both Harry and Nicodemus totally believe in their ideals and are willing to sacrifice everything for them, are willing to put everything on the line for what they believe in. It's just what they believe in is kind of the opposite things. For both Harry and Nicodemus, their relationships with their daughter are big deals and sources of conflict in their life. But where Harry isn't involved enough with his daughter, Nicodemus is kind of involved too much with his daughter. But for both of them, this is a big part of their character arcs and their life decisions. So in the end, Michael is able to extend the hand of friendship and redemption to both Harry and Nicodemus. And Nicodemus ultimately decides not to take it, while Harry does decide to take it. And that's where you really see the richness of this character foil for Harry. Because a lot of Skin Game is Harry realizing that he wants to take care of his daughter and really be there for her, even though previously on Harry Dresden's soap opera drama, Harry had decided that he really shouldn't be in Maggie's life and shouldn't even know where she is. But part of him coming to terms with being in her life is also coming to terms with his self, that he isn't going to suddenly become evil just because now he's the Winter Knight. However, for Nicodemus, it's a little flipped, because for Nicodemus, sacrificing his daughter was what almost put him over the edge to joining Team Jedi again. When he did this, it was so close, and that's when Michael is able to come in and give him the offer of redemption. And I feel like no one else but Michael could have really given this offer, because Nicodemus knows Michael. Nicodemus knows that Michael will stay true to this offer, that he is steadfast and really believes that Nicodemus can be redeemed. But even all of this, all of these chances, all of these events that came to pass to make Nicodemus so ready to leave behind his ways, he still didn't do it. So this is the most delicious character foily contrast between Nicodemus and Harry, is that Nicodemus is willing to sacrifice his daughter in order to stay true on his course. And Harry, on the other hand, is willing to completely derail his course for his daughter. First, in order to save her back in changes, and now to come back and be her father in a more personal and close way. So in Ascher, we have what Harry could have been if he was a little less lucky or if he had to deal with more of the consequences of his own actions. With Michael, we have who Harry could become through redemption and through hope and faith. And with Nicodemus, we have who Harry would be if he prioritized his goals over love and family. And finally, we have Waldo Butters, which is kind of a different inversion of Harry. Not exactly a foil, but Butters in this book is very obviously following in Harry's footsteps. He describes Harry as being the big sheriff in town, and when Harry left, Butters stepped up. And we see this as a mirror of exactly what Harry did when he stepped up in the first place. Because Butters isn't afraid, just like Harry, to challenge people that are stronger than him, that are bigger than him, because they need to be challenged. And we see this in the end when he's willing to go out and fight Nicodemus even though he knows he can't win, and when he challenges Harry. So I've seen some people express that Butters getting the Sword of Faith in the end doesn't really fit, because throughout the first half of this book, Butters does not have faith in Harry. He thinks that he is going to the dark side and isn't believing in his friends. But I would argue that by the end, Butters has learned an important lesson about trusting people even though there are all these red flags. Because I think the linchpin in being worthy of wielding one of the swords isn't necessarily perfect righteousness. It's having faith that other people can change. And we see this with Michael and with Sonia and with Butters. That maybe in the beginning of this book, Butters is having trouble believing that Harry can overcome the Winter Mantle. However, by the end, Butters decides to trust him and have faith in Harry and have faith in himself, that he can do something to help even though it doesn't look right. I would also like to point out that I feel like we have a little bit of an unreliable narrator thing going on in Cold Days and Skin Game, where people are trusting Harry less and less. And maybe from our reader's perspective, filtered through Harry, this seems like so unfair. Why is Butters thinking he's evil all of a sudden just because he's been absent? But when I was thinking about this, I remembered the scene in Proven Guilty where Harry meets Fix as the summer knight fully grown into his strength. So Harry says, "The summer knight projected confidence and strength. They shone from him like light from a star. When he opened the door, the dim shadows retreated somewhat, and a whispering breeze that smelled of pine and honeysuckle rolled through the room. This was what he had become, the summer knight, mortal champion of the Seelie court, a thunderstorm in blue jeans and a green cotton shirt." So if that is what the summer knight's aura feels like when he's just walking into a room, not doing anything particularly summer nighty, what does Harry feel like? Because wouldn't it be the exact opposite? Wouldn't it be coldness and darkness and wickedness that he is just projecting whenever he walks into a room? No wonder everyone doesn't trust him. I think about the scene in Cold Days where he brings up the garage from the depths with a big iceberg. And then afterwards, everyone's looking at him like, what just happened? And they're all scared of him. And you can just imagine that even though Harry doesn't realize it's happening, all of these characters are feeling this aura of terrible winterness. Really, I think we should just give bonus points for all the people who are still trusting Harry, because it really shows how much they have faith in Harry, even though that must be really hard these days. And this is, of course, Harry's exact problem, because he himself needs to learn how to trust that just because he's signed on with Mab doesn't mean he's automatically going to go to the dark side. That if Harry accepts that he is one of the good guys and will continue to be one of the good guys, he can be a full-time father. He can start a romantic relationship with Murphy. He can take care of the swords. He can be the defender of Chicago. But he can only do that if he's sure that he's going to stay good. So it's also a little bit of Harry coming to believe a little bit more in redemption himself, for his own free will and his own ability to stay true to his principles, even if there's all these outside pressures on him. Which connects back to his character foil of Nicodemus, that even though there's all these outside pressures on Nicodemus in this book, Nicodemus sticks to his guns, even though those are evil guns. So in the end, I'd say that this book isn't perfect, because the pacing feels a little off sometimes. The heist is so exciting and high action, and there's all these secrets building, and you know that there's plot twists coming, and then it slows down for all of these sweet emotional moments, and sometimes it can feel a little, okay, get back to the heist now, when are we gonna learn this secret? But all of these beautiful emotional moments really make up for it, especially the scenes where Harry is interacting with Maggie, where he decides that he can be her father. Or when Michael is able to talk Harry into believing that he can be one of the good guys. Or in the very end, when Harry is able to accept Amarakius again and decide that maybe he has better judgment than he thinks he does, which is debatable because sometimes Harry's good judgment, not very good. But in the end, I really enjoyed Skin Game. It's a book that builds on 14 books before it and does it so wonderfully, because this book would not be as strong if we hadn't gone through those 14 books of beautiful plot beforehand. And those 14 books of beautiful plot wouldn't be as strong if we didn't get this beautiful resolution to so many of these ideas.